Funeral guards blocked the retired firefighter until his name was read on the wall of heroes. "Move along, Grandpa. This ain't a soup kitchen." The cruel words hit Robert "Bobby" Harrison like a physical blow as he approached the Memorial Hall steps. The security guard's sneer was as cold as the October morning in Washington, D.C., and his dismissive gesture made Bobby feel smaller than he had in decades. At 68, Bobby had weathered countless storms in his 40 years with the Chicago Fire Department, but nothing had prepared him for this moment of public humiliation. His weathered hands clutched a simple invitation card, the paper now damp with nervous perspiration, as curious onlookers began to gather and stare. "Sir, I have an invitation," Bobby said quietly, his voice barely audible above the morning traffic. "I'm Robert Harrison, retired Chicago Fire Department." The second guard stepped forward with a harsh laugh. "Sure you are, Pops. And I bet you single-handedly saved the entire city, right?" His voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We get 5 guys like you every week trying to crash events with some sob story." Bobby's face flushed red as families in formal black attire moved past him up the granite steps. They were warmly greeted and ushered inside without question, their legitimate connections to fallen heroes evident in their grief-stricken faces. He watched as a young widow with 2 small children was embraced by officials at the entrance, her gold star pin catching the morning light. "Please," Bobby tried again, holding up his invitation with shaking hands. "I just want to pay my respects. I lost friends in the line of duty I served for. 40 years behind a desk doesn't make you a hero," the first guard interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "Real firefighters get personal escorts to these things, not handwritten notes from their grandkids." The word stung because Bobby suddenly questioned everything. Was his invitation legitimate? The official seal looked real, but doubt crept in like smoke under a door. Around him, the autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant sound of bagpipes warming up inside the hall. Each note felt like a reminder of what he was being denied. Other arriving guests began to whisper and point. A group of active-duty firefighters from New York walked past, their dress uniforms pristine, their heads held high. The guards immediately straightened up and offered respectful greetings, creating a stark contrast to their treatment of Bobby. "Look, buddy," the second guard said, stepping closer with an intimidating stance. "I'm being nice here. Walk away now, or we call the real police. This ceremony is for heroes and their families, not every old-timer looking for his 5 minutes of fame." Bobby felt his chest tighten as the rejection settled in. His best navy suit, the same one he'd worn to countless funerals for fallen comrades, suddenly felt too big, too old, too inadequate. The small firefighter's pin on his lapel seemed to mock him now, a relic of a past that apparently meant nothing to these gatekeepers. The sounds of the memorial service preparation continued around him, the gentle murmur of genuine mourners, the rustle of programs being distributed, the solemn voices of officials inside discussing the ceremony's order of events. But Bobby felt completely isolated, standing there on the steps like an unwanted intruder. Finally, Bobby stepped back from the entrance, his shoulders sagging in defeat. Bobby retreated to a weathered bench across the street from the Memorial Hall, his legs suddenly feeling too weak to carry him any further. The cold metal bit through his suit jacket as he sat down heavily, watching as the last of the invited guests disappeared through the imposing entrance doors. The sounds of the ceremony beginning drifted across the street. Muffled voices, the scrape of chairs being arranged, and then the haunting wail of bagpipes that made his throat tighten with emotion. He had heard those same pipes at too many funerals, had stood at attention while they played Amazing Grace for brothers who would never answer another call. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, completely oblivious to the memorial service happening across the street. Cars continued their steady flow along the avenue, their occupants going about their daily business while heroes were being honored just yards away. The contrast between the solemnity inside and the indifference outside struck Bobby as cruelly appropriate. Wasn't this how it had always been? The public going about their lives while firefighters risked theirs? His mind wandered back to Chicago, to Station 47 on the south side where he had spent most of his career. The old brick building with its red doors and brass pole, the smell of diesel fuel and cleaning supplies, the sound of boots hitting the floor when the alarm rang. He thought about Captain Williams, who had taken a young Bobby under his wing 35 years ago. "Harrison," Williams had said after Bobby's first fatal fire, when they had lost an elderly woman despite their best efforts. The hardest part of this job isn't running into burning buildings. It's living with the weight of every life you couldn't save, and never letting that weight stop you from trying to save the next one. Bobby had carried those words with him through 4 decades of service. Through the apartment fire on Halstead Street, where he had pulled 3 children from a second-story window. Through the warehouse blaze that had collapsed part of the roof on his crew. Through the chemical plant explosion that had sent him to the hospital with second-degree burns and smoke inhalation. But none of those memories seemed to matter now as he sat on this bench, rejected and humiliated. Inside the hall, he could hear a speaker beginning the ceremony. The voice was amplified but distant, talking about courage and sacrifice, about the thin red line that stood between chaos and safety. Bobby strained to hear, catching fragments of words that once would have filled him with pride. Today we honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. The voice continued, and Bobby felt his eyes begin to water. A young mother pushing a stroller walked past, her toddler pointing excitedly at the fire trucks parked ceremonially outside the hall. "Fire truck! Fire truck!" The child squealed with delight, and for a moment Bobby managed a small smile. Kids always loved the trucks. That had been one of the best parts of the job, visiting schools and seeing their faces light up. The October wind picked up, scattering leaves across the sidewalk and making Bobby pull his jacket tighter. He realized he had nowhere else to go. His hotel room was paid for through tomorrow, but the ceremony was the only reason he had made the trip to D.C. His modest pension didn't allow for many luxuries, and this pilgrimage had taken most of his savings for the month. As the speaker inside continued, Bobby closed his eyes and tried to remember why he had wanted to come in the first place. It wasn't for recognition or glory. He had never been that kind of man. It was for Tommy Chen, who had died in a basement flashover in 1987. For Maria Rodriguez, who had succumbed to lung cancer from years of smoke exposure. For Captain Williams himself, who had suffered a fatal heart attack responding to a 3-alarm fire just 2 years before Bobby's retirement. The ceremony continued without him, and Bobby Harrison sat alone on his bench, an aging guardian forgotten by the very institution he had served with unwavering loyalty. The afternoon sun broke through the October clouds as Bobby remained on his bench, watching the ceremony continue without him. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the complimentary hotel breakfast, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Something kept him anchored to this spot as if walking away would be a final admission of defeat. Inside the hall, the tone of the ceremony had shifted. The amplified voice of the speaker grew more solemn, more reverent. Bobby could make out individual words now. Sacrifice, brotherhood, never forgotten. Each phrase was like a key turning in a lock he had thought was permanently sealed. "We now come to the reading of the Wall of Heroes," the speaker announced, his voice carrying clearly across the street. "These are the names of those who gave their lives in service to others, whose courage in the face of impossible odds saved countless lives, often at the cost of their own." Bobby's breath caught in his throat. He had heard of the Wall of Heroes, a memorial that honored first responders who had died in the line of duty, or whose extraordinary acts of heroism had defined their careers. But he had never seen it, never been invited to a ceremony where the names were read aloud. The first names began to echo from the hall. Lieutenant James Morrison, Boston Fire Department, died in the Worcester Cold Storage Fire, December 1999. Each name was followed by a brief description of their sacrifice, their final act of courage. Bobby found himself standing without realizing it, drawn closer to the hall despite the morning's humiliation. Other passers-by had stopped too, sensing the gravity of the moment. Even the joggers had slowed, removing their earbuds out of respect. Captain Robert Thompson, Philadelphia Fire Department, died attempting to rescue a family of 4 from a row house fire, March 2003. The names continued, each one a story of heroism, each one representing families left behind, colleagues forever changed. As the list progressed, Bobby noticed something strange happening. The security guards who had dismissed him so cruelly that morning had stepped outside the hall. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced by something else: attention, respect for the ceremony taking place behind them. Firefighter Maria Santos, Los Angeles County, died from complications related to 9/11 rescue efforts, August 2019. The speaker's voice wavered slightly. Even he was moved by the weight of these stories. Bobby took another step closer, and this time, the guards didn't move to stop him. They were focused on the ceremony, their heads bowed in respect. Other people had gathered too. Construction workers who had stopped their lunch break, office workers who had stepped out of nearby buildings, tourists who had stumbled upon something sacred. Lieutenant Michael O'Brien, Seattle Fire Department, posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor for his actions during the Occidental Park incident, January 2015. The names kept coming, and with each one, Bobby felt something stirring in his chest. Not just grief for the fallen, but something else. A recognition. A memory trying to surface. Then Bobby heard something that made his blood run cold. The speaker had reached a section of names that sounded different, older. These weren't recent casualties, but historical honors. Names from decades past. Captain David Williams, Chicago Fire Department Station 47, died of cardiac arrest during a 3-alarm warehouse fire, September 2018. Bobby's knees nearly buckled. His mentor, his captain, the man who had shaped him into the firefighter he became. But the speaker continued, and what came next shattered Bobby's world completely. The David Williams Heroism Award is presented posthumously to firefighter Robert Harrison, Chicago Fire Department, for extraordinary courage during the Riverside Elementary School fire, November 1995, where his actions saved the lives of 42 children and 8 teachers. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Bobby Harrison's name, spoken with reverence inside the hall he had been barred from entering. The security guards' heads snapped up, their eyes immediately scanning the crowd until they found Bobby's shocked face. Around him, the gathered crowd began to murmur. Someone had heard the name, seen his reaction. The pieces were falling into place, and Bobby Harrison realized that he wasn't just any old man trying to crash a ceremony. He was one of the heroes being honored. The silence that followed was deafening. Bobby stood frozen on the sidewalk, his face drained of all color as the weight of what had just happened settled over him like a heavy blanket. Around him, the crowd of onlookers began to understand what they had just witnessed. The man who had been turned away at the door was the same Robert Harrison whose heroism was being celebrated inside. The first security guard, the same one who had called him Grandpa just hours earlier, slowly approached with his radio crackling in his hand. His earlier arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by something Bobby had rarely seen in his lifetime. Genuine awe mixed with deep shame. "Sir," the guard said, his voice barely above a whisper, Are you Robert Harrison from Chicago Fire Department?" Bobby nodded slowly, still unable to speak. His mind was reeling back to that November day in 1995, the day he had tried so hard to forget, the day that had haunted his dreams for nearly 30 years. Inside the hall, the speaker continued with the citation. When Riverside Elementary School's heating system exploded during a parent-teacher conference, firefighter Harrison entered the building 7 separate times, carrying children and adults to safety, through smoke so thick that visibility was 0. On his final trip, the roof began to collapse. Harrison used his own body to shield the last group of evacuees, sustaining severe injuries that ended his active duty career. The second guard had joined the first, both men looking stricken. Behind them, people were beginning to emerge from the memorial hall. Word was spreading inside that the honored firefighter was standing outside, that he had been turned away from his own recognition ceremony. "Mr. Harrison," the first guard said, and Bobby was startled to see tears in the man's eyes. "Sir, we had no idea. We're so sorry. Please, sir, please come inside." But Bobby couldn't move. The memories were flooding back now, unstoppable as water through a broken dam. He could smell the smoke again, hear the screaming, feel the searing heat against his face. He remembered little Amy Peterson, only 6 years old, who had been hiding under a desk in the art room. She had called out for her mother through the thick black smoke, and Bobby had crawled on his hands and knees, following her voice until he found her trembling form. He remembered Mrs. Chen, the elderly janitor who had been trapped near the boiler room, her leg pinned under fallen debris. He had lifted a burning beam that should have taken 3 men to move, adrenaline and desperation giving him strength he never knew he possessed. Most of all, he remembered the moment when the ceiling started to give way and he had to make the choice, save himself or shield the people behind him. There had been no hesitation, no thought for his own safety. He had simply spread his arms wide and covered as many as he could, feeling the burning timber crash down onto his back and shoulders. "I just did my job," Bobby whispered. The same words he had said to every reporter, every official, every person who had tried to call him a hero back then. Anyone would have done the same thing. A woman in a black dress appeared at the hall entrance. She wore the insignia of a fire chief. Behind her came more people, firefighters, officials, family members of the fallen. They had all heard the announcement, all realized what had happened. Among them, Bobby noticed a middle-aged woman pushing a man in a wheelchair, both of them staring at him with recognition and tears streaming down their faces. "Robert Harrison?" the fire chief asked, approaching with profound respect. "Chief Patricia Martinez, DC Fire and EMS, sir. It would be our greatest honor if you would join us inside." The woman with the wheelchair approached hesitantly, her voice shaking. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Sarah Peterson Williams. You saved my daughter Amy that day. She's a teacher now, has 3 children of her own. She named her oldest son Robert after you." She gestured to the man in the wheelchair. "And this is James Chen, Mrs. Chen's grandson. She lived 18 more years because of what you did that day. Long enough to see him graduate college, get married, start a family of his own." Bobby's knees finally gave way, and several hands reached out to steady him. The crowd around him had grown to include passers-by, construction workers, even drivers who had pulled over after seeing the commotion. Everyone seemed to understand they were witnessing something sacred. "I don't understand," Bobby said, his voice cracking. No one ever told me about any wall, any award. I just came because I got an invitation in the mail." Chief Martinez smiled through her own tears. "Mr. Harrison, you were nominated by Captain Williams before his death. He spent months gathering testimony from the people you saved that day, from your fellow firefighters, from the families whose children came home because of you. The award was approved last year, but we couldn't locate you until recently. Captain Williams left a letter with the nomination. He wrote that you never sought recognition, that you refused interviews and declined honors, but that the world needed to know about heroes like you." More people were emerging from the hall now, forming a respectful circle around Bobby. Among them were firefighters from departments across the country, their dress uniforms gleaming in the afternoon sun. Several removed their caps in respect, and one elderly fire chief stepped forward. "Son," the old chief said, his voice gravelly with emotion. "I was at the scene that day. I was Assistant Chief Morrison then, came in with mutual aid from the next district. I watched you go into that building over and over, and I've been in this business 43 years. I've never seen anything like what you did. You didn't just save those people's lives. You showed every firefighter there what it truly means to serve." The bagpipes began to play again inside the hall, and this time Bobby recognized the tune, "Going Home," the traditional farewell played at firefighter funerals. But today, it felt like something else. Today, it felt like a welcome. The 2 security guards who had humiliated him earlier stepped forward together. The first one removed his cap entirely, his voice heavy with shame and respect. "Mr. Harrison, sir, there are no words for what we did to you today. We were wrong, we were cruel, and we dishonored not just you but everyone this ceremony represents. If you'll allow us, we'd like to escort you inside personally. It would be our honor." As Bobby finally walked up those granite steps, flanked by the same guards who had turned him away, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the weight of being truly seen, truly recognized for who he was rather than what he appeared to be. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the burden he'd carried for decades was finally being lifted from his shoulders. The doors of the memorial hall opened wide, and as Robert Harrison crossed the threshold, the entire assembly rose to their feet in thunderous applause. The sound washed over him like a warm wave, carrying with it the gratitude of every life he had touched, every family he had kept whole, every child who had grown up because of his courage on one terrible November day. Behind him, the October sun broke through the clouds completely, casting long shadows of redemption across the steps he had climbed alone, and would never have to climb alone again. The invitation in his pocket, wrinkled now from his nervous handling, had brought him exactly where he belonged. Home among the heroes he had always been too humbled to believe he was worthy to stand beside. What did you think of Bobby Harrison's incredible story? Have you ever encountered a hero who didn't realize their own worth, or witnessed someone being judged unfairly before the truth came to light? Share your thoughts and similar experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If this story moved you and reminded you of the unsung heroes in our communities, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more inspiring true stories that celebrate the extraordinary people among us. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful tales of courage, redemption, and the human spirit that deserve to be remembered and honored.